All right, so get this. We're diving into this GBNews video with the title, Wait, Bill Gates just said what on live TV? Like, come on, really?
Yeah, gotta love the clickbait titles, right?
Totally. But hey, this video actually digs into something kind of serious. Bill Gates was on The View and basically said if USAID funding gets cut, millions of people could die.
Yeah, that's a pretty intense statement.
Right. So we got to ask, is this for real or is it just like some kind of power move?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think to really understand what's going on here, we need to step back and look at what USAID actually does.
Okay, so like what is USAID? Why is it such a big deal?
So USAID stands for the U.S. Agency for International Development. And it's like the main way the U.S. government gives aid to other countries.
Mm.
We're talking about billions of dollars every year going towards things like vaccines, emergency relief after disasters, you name it.
So it's not just like writing checks. They're actually out there doing stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They work with partners in developing countries on projects to fight poverty, hunger, disease, all sorts of things.
Wow, that's a lot. And I bet not everyone's happy with how that money's being spent, right?
You're right. There has been some controversy. The GBNews video mentions how even the Trump administration was looking into USAID because of, like, alleged mismanagement and corruption.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
And this is where things get even more interesting because it turns out the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is pretty closely tied to USAID.
Really? What's the connection there?
Well, they work together on a bunch of global health initiatives, and get this, the Gates Foundation has received over $2 billion in funding from USAID since 2009.
Whoa, hold on. So Bill Gates, one of the richest guys in the world, his foundation is getting billions from a government agency that's being investigated. And now he's saying cutting their funding will lead to mass deaths.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to unpack, and it raises some serious questions about how much influence a private foundation should have over taxpayer money, especially when there are concerns about how that money is being used.
Yeah, you gotta wonder, is it really all about saving lives or is there something else going on here?
Exactly. It's like, are we talking pure philanthropy, or are there political agendas mixed in? It's not always so clear-cut.
Right. And that's where I think things start to get really interesting because it's not just about Bill Gates. We also have to consider Elon Musk and his whole take on this situation.
Ah, yes. Elon Musk, always a fascinating character to bring into the mix.
Totally. He's been pretty vocal about his issues with Bill Gates and USAID, right? What's his angle?
Yeah, he's called this whole thing globalist gatekeeping and aligns more with those America First ideas, less government, more private sector solutions.
So he sees USAID and the Gates Foundation as basically a way for elites to control global health.
Pretty much. He's all about individual countries having more control over their own affairs.
And this isn't just some friendly disagreement between billionaires, right? I mean, remember that pregnant man, meme Musk, tweeted about Gates.
Oh, yeah, that was brutal. It shows that there's some real tension there. And I think it represents a bigger clash between these two worldviews, globalism versus nationalism.
It's like two totally different visions for how the world should work. And it's not just theoretical, right? This has huge implications for how we deal with things like pandemics, poverty, you name it.
Absolutely. We're talking about power dynamics, competing ideologies, and the potential for things to go really well or really badly, depending on who's calling the shots.
Man, this is heavy stuff. And I have a feeling we're just scratching the surface here.
You're telling me we've set the stage, but things are about to get even wilder when we start talking about Gates' predictions, about future pandemics, and how that all ties in with his own, financial interests.
Oh boy, this is getting good. I can't wait to dive into that.
Buckle up, because it's going to be a wild ride.
So we're back, and honestly, my head's still spinning a little from that last part. We're talking about huge amounts of money, really powerful people, and this whole globalism versus nationalism thing. It's a lot.
I know, right? It's crazy how this one YouTube video about Bill Gates on The View has opened up this whole can of worms about global health. It really shows you how everything's connected, Politics, economics, even like personal drama between billionaires.
It's definitely not just about like vaccines and stuff anymore. It's about power and control and who benefits from all of this. And speaking of benefits, we kind of left off on this idea that Bill Gates could actually make money from the pandemics he's predicting, which is kind of messed up, right?
It does make you think. And it's hard to ignore how the Gates Foundation is structured. They have a ton of investments in companies that could profit from a global health crisis.
So it's like he's saying, watch out for pandemics while also being in a position to get richer if one happens. That's a tough one to wrap your head around. How do we make sense of that?
Well, you can't deny that the Gates Foundation has done a lot of good to the world. They've helped fight diseases like polio and malaria and gotten vaccines to people who really need them. But at the same time, we have to be aware of potential conflicts of interest when you have philanthropy and profit motives mixing together.
Yeah, you have to be a little skeptical, right? Like, appreciate the good work, but also keep an eye on the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's all about asking tough questions and demanding transparency. We need to make sure that decisions are being made to actually help people, not just to benefit powerful institutions or individuals.
And this brings us back to that whole globalism versus nationalism thing. The video paints Bill Gates as this big globalist figure, like he believes these big international organizations are the answer to everything.
That's one way to look at it. He definitely supports organizations like the World Health Organization and thinks they're key to dealing with stuff like pandemics and climate change.
But then you have guys like Elon Musk and Trump who are more about individual countries doing their own thing right. They don't like this idea of global control.
Right? They think these global organizations can get bureaucratic and out of touch, and that decisions should be made by individual countries who are accountable to their own people.
It's like two completely different ways of running the world, and it really matters which approach we take, right? It affects how we handle things like pandemics, poverty, all these big problems.
No doubt about it. We're talking about different ways of organizing society and different ideas about who should have power and how it should be used.
So which model is better? It's a tough question.
It's no easy answer, honestly. Both approaches have pros and cons. Global cooperation is great for things that affect everyone, like climate change, but it can also be slow and inefficient. And focusing on individual countries can be good for tailoring solutions to specific needs, but it can also lead to countries not working together when they need to.
So maybe it's about finding a balance, like recognizing that some things need global action while others are better handled by individual countries.
That's probably the most sensible approach. Not getting too caught up in ideology, but being practical and flexible based on the situation.
Makes sense. But all this talk about global versus national control gets even more intense when you bring in the whole lab leak theory and how that could impact future
Oh
pandemics.
yeah, that's a whole other layer to this. The video we're talking about digs into USAID's funding of research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is where some people think COVID-19 might have come from.
Yeah, that's a really controversial topic. A lot of conspiracy theories flying around. So what do we actually know about USAID's involvement in all of this?
Well, it's public knowledge that USAID gave money to EcoHealth Alliance, which in turn supported research on bat coronaviruses at that lab in Wuhan. But the goal was to understand these viruses and prevent pandemics, not to create them.
So it wasn't like some secret bioweapons program or anything.
There's no evidence to support that, but the lab leak theory does raise questions about safety protocols and the risks involved in this kind of research.
Because if the virus did escape from a lab accidentally or intentionally, it means we messed up big time. And that's a scary thought when you consider what could happen with even dead liver viruses in the future.
Absolutely. It shows how important it is to be careful with this kind of research. We need more transparency, oversight, and global collaboration to make sure we're not putting the whole world at risk.
It's a tricky balance, right? We need to put the boundaries of science to be prepared for future threats, but we also need to be super responsible and make sure we're not creating more problems when we're solving.
It's a tightrope walk, for sure. We need to weigh the potential benefits against the risks and make decisions that prioritize the safety of everyone on the planet.
It's like that saying, we're all in this together. A threat to one country is a threat to all of us. So working together is really the only way forward.
Couldn't agree more, and I think this highlights why these conversations are so important. We need to be informed, engaged, and willing to challenge the status quo to make sure we're creating a healthier and safer world for everyone.
Well said. We've covered a ton of ground today, from Bill Gates's crazy statement on The View to global power dynamics to the ethics of scientific research. It's mind-blowing.
It is, and it shows just how complex these issues are. There are no easy answers, but by talking about them openly and honestly, we can start to find our way forward.
You know what's amazing? We started with a YouTube video and ended up having this deep philosophical discussion about the future of humanity. It's been a wild ride.
That's the beauty of deep dives. You never know where they'll take you. But the important thing is to keep asking questions and keep learning.
So true. Well, I think it's time to move on to our final segment where we'll try to tie all this together and figure out what it all means for us and for the future of global health.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, so here we are, like the final stretch of this wild deep dive. And honestly, it's a lot to process. We started with this whole Bill Gates thing on The View, and now we're talking about global power structure, scientific ethics. It's kind of intense.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to wrap your head around, all these different perspectives and arguments and potential consequences. It can feel kind of overwhelming, you know?
Totally. Like, what can we even do as individuals when we're talking about these huge global forces? It's easy to feel powerless.
I get that, but I think that feeling of powerlessness is exactly what the people in charge want you to feel.
That's interesting.
Because when we feel powerless, we're less likely to speak up or demand change. But the truth is, we do have power, especially when we work together.
Okay, so how do we actually make a difference? We've learned all this stuff now. What?
Well, first of all, I think just having these conversations is huge. You're not just letting this information sit in your head. You're talking about it with others, and that's how we raise awareness.
So, like, spreading the word is a good starting point.
Definitely. And then it's about holding those in power accountable. Our elected officials, the leaders of these big organizations, even super rich philanthropists like Bill Gates, we need to demand transparency and make sure they're actually working for the good of everyone, not just themselves.
That makes sense, but it also makes me think about our own responsibility here. Like, we've talked a lot about Bill Gates and Elon Musk, but what about us regular people? What can we do?
That's a great question. And it's easy to get caught up in what these big names are doing. But the truth is, change often starts from the bottom up.
Hmm.
Grassroots movements, everyday people coming together to demand better.
So we're not just waiting for some billionaire to save the day. We can actually make things happen ourselves.
Exactly. It's about staying informed, voting for leaders who share your values, supporting organizations that are doing good work, and even just making conscious choices in your own life about what you buy, where you get your information, all of that.
It's wild to think that we started with this kind of silly YouTube video, and now we're having this deep conversation about our role in shaping the future. It's empowering.
It is. And that's what I love about these deep dives. They can really open your eyes to new ways of thinking and understanding the world.
So true. Well, I think we've covered just about everything for today. We talked about global health, power dynamics, the future of science. It's been a lot.
We covered a lot of ground, but I think the main takeaway is that these are complex issues with no easy answers. And the more we talk about them, the better equipped we'll be to make informed decisions and create a better future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that wraps up another deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone, and keep those brains working.